You are my beloved. You are my beloved. It feels good, right? You see, we all get to be that. This story is about Jesus' experience, but we get to identify with Jesus completely. We know that we are included in this, each one of us, without exception. So we can situate ourselves in this story. We can identify with Jesus as the beloved. This isn't shocking. It's not arrogant or blasphemous. As the body of Christ together, we all, each one of us, have that spark, that divine presence within us. So hearing that powerful scene of baptism, where a voice came from above, calling out sweetly to Jesus, "Beloved, you are my beloved." Let us listen with Jesus and hear that voice calling to us too. But this also means that we go with Jesus on that journey into the wilderness. So I invite you to settle back, to allow yourself to edge up onto the wilderness, onto the discomfort, the anguish in your life, in your story, in the story of your families, or this morning in my story. You see, on the surface, I am also the beloved, and I thought I knew that 7 years ago now. I was freshly graduated from a master's degree program. I was on my way to a doctoral program. It seemed from a sense of social success that I was on my way. I had grown up with no religion in my life. I was scientific and cold and logical. I was rational. I knew what was going on. But I was intensely curious about how on earth people had faith. So I wanted to study and teach religion, and I had this sense that the way to learn about it was from the inside. No, not going to a church. That'd be too simple. Not talking to people about their faith, that would be too logical. But to go to seminary. So I went to the Boston University School of Theology, trying to understand Christianity from the inside. I had just survived that program, not having any better sense of why people were faithful, but just grateful that I had gotten through. And so that summer I was on a plane, and it was crowded, filled with hundreds of passengers. There was a thunderstorm, and we were circling over Atlanta, unable to land. As I said to the children, my best friend is Marla, and I was on the way. We were coming from separate locations to meet in San Francisco. I had no way to tell her I was late or delayed. She was worried. She was angry. Where is he? By the time we got to San Francisco, it was 11 p.m. We were exhausted, weary travelers. The taxi dropped us off late at night in front of our hotel. I had confirmed the reservations just 2 weeks earlier, and we went to open the door, and it was locked. It's not just that there was no room at the inn. The inn had gone out of business. It was shut down, closed, hotel no longer there. We had nowhere to go. 11 o'clock at night. Marla, not knowing what else to do, we were strangers in the city, called her husband Jake and said, "Find us a hotel." We found a motor lodge down the street and settled in for our first night, where we promptly found out that it was the business office for a series of prostitutes who spent their evening being beaten by their pimps, who spent their evening being robbed and assaulted, who spent their evening suffering. The next morning, after a sleepless night, Marla got up and went to get us breakfast and was told by 3 different people, "You need to get out of this neighborhood." Marla said to me, "Let me call my pastor." And I thought, you are ridiculous. Your pastor is 3,000 miles away, back in Massachusetts. What on earth can she do? Furthermore, you are United Methodist, and I picked up enough in seminary to know that while our denomination's slogan is open hearts, open minds, and open doors, that gay, lesbian, bisexual people are not fully included. They are excluded from so much of the church. And I thought, if they don't accept gay people, they are never going to accept me. You see, I'm a transgender man. I was there in San Francisco to have surgery to help make my body match me as a man, my sense of myself on the inside. Marla asked a second time, because what else could she do? I said no. She asked a third time, and who says no to someone 3 times? There's something about that in the Bible. We can talk after the service about that. So Marla called her pastor in Massachusetts. And within 1 hour, the local bishop's office in San Francisco had called and said, what do you need? How can we help you? What is your location? We can be there in 20 minutes. We have nursing staff. We have people to help take care of your bandages, to provide you food, to provide you a place to stay. The hospitality, this Christian hospitality I had heard and read so much about in my classes, I was overwhelmed with. I broke down on the steps of City Hall sobbing. My heart was strangely warmed by this experience of people without question, without exclusion, without a second to think about it, jumping forward to welcome the stranger into their midst with overwhelming hospitality. I ended up healing, surgery went well. I was still cold and rational and logical, and I thought I would do Martha's home congregation at the time a favor. And I'd be nice to them, to thank them for their prayers, so I'd go pay them a visit. Isn't that nice of me? I walked into this church the first time I had walked into a church, probably since a funeral 10 years earlier. And a man said, Sean, I know it is you. Now, Marla's not here, but we are delighted to see you, and here is your name tag. He went to hug me and then said, oh, wait, you have had surgery on your chest. How do I greet you without hurting you? This welcome, this witness of the Holy Spirit's love continued. I continued to stay with that congregation and grow in faith. I continued to find the Spirit moving in me. I found some sense of wholeness. It was a journey. It's not instantaneous. At the same time, I was in a wilderness. Going through transition from one gender to another is not easy in a society that wants to put people in boxes. I lost everything. I lost all of my friends from before seminary. I lost my family. My brother has 3 children, one of whom I'm a godparent for, and I'm not allowed to see them. I lost jobs when they did background checks and found out I used to be female. I got threatened with eviction from my apartment. I struggled in a wilderness of feeling alone when it looked like everyone's life was normal except my own. Yet here were people who were welcoming me and loving me and including me, and it started to transform me. I still had this sense of helping other people just because I'd been helped. So when a few transgender people started looking to me for some advice or some comfort because they were just starting anew, I started having conversations with them. And as time went on, I found that the people that I was connecting with were growing and expanding, and we were having conversations like, I'm divorced. Is that inclusion? Is God's saying you are beloved, does that include me? I started hearing from people who were uncertain of their faith, who did not understand if the church could be a place for them, who were wondering if that expansive, inclusive love was meant for them. The woman who joined the church when it was segregated wondered if in the face of enduring racism there was a place for her. We started to share our stories on a deep level with one another. And I began to realize that there was a powerful mutual transformation at work. The Spirit was moving in us. And what I started to realize is I was not the beloved because I was the golden child, because I had academic success, because I was successful. But precisely because who I was as a child of God. Not in spite of being transgender, but precisely because each of us are part of this wondrous creation of God's. This is the good news. What this wilderness did, what the wilderness I experienced, what the wilderness Jesus experienced does. I want to be clear here. It's not that you have to go out and suffer to be closer to God. It is not an endurance test. It is not a litmus test. It is not a hurdle to jump over. I think it's just a fact of life. Sometimes we struggle and we have pain. But in this process, we begin to come face to face with what makes us beautiful, beloved, is that each one of us is beloved just as we are. And in doing that, in starting to make the connections to people, I started to find that my wilderness became distant from what I used to think it was. The wilderness now was a wilderness, a disconnect from the status quo, from what I had thought was normal. I found myself doing things like hopping in the car to go visit a stranger who was in a mental hospital and alone, because I wanted to be there for him. I found myself saying yes to requests from people to sleep on my floor because they were traveling and had no place to stay. Now, in my uptight, rigid New England household, that was not normal. And I want to say, as United Methodists, we have this long history of connecting to the immediate personal need and trying to change the system, the status quo. We have a history of working with people in our communities at a time when alcohol abuse was 8 times what it is now, to try to reduce domestic violence, to try to reduce spending away all your money on alcohol. And yet we also, at the same time, were building a building opposite Capitol Hill so we could work with politicians to create policies that would help our children, that would help our families. Here in New England, we have a history where a minister connecting with the poor and the impoverished in the South End also worked to systematically change the system by creating what we now know as goodwill industry, giving people job, training, skills, a way out of poverty. But I want to focus for just a minute on the personal piece, because I think that that's where we struggle the most. I work a lot with college students, and they want to be part of something really important and big. They want the drama. You might say melodrama, right? But I think it's about sheer moral courage. Where do you find that motivation within you? When you feel that sense of protection for a child? When do the needs of the world break open your heart so you feel that love for others? When do you break down your sense of, oh, that person looks different, or, oh, we don't talk to each other on the subway, or, I feel like I should say something, but I don't know if I should. I had that experience before I joined the church. Years ago, I worked in a call center where people would call about their money. It was their financial investments. And it was so many problems, so much weight of the world. People making $2 an hour, not speaking much English, working at a hotel, their money being taken away from them without any clear explanation of why it was being put into an account, calling me and saying, I need those $3 to feed my children. Calls from people who were losing their homes to foreclosure, who were laid off and couldn't access their money. It was a litany of human pain, and it seemed too much. And so in the winter living in Maine, I would put on my snowshoes and I would run out into the woods. And one day I ran and I could not take it. And in Maine, we tap a lot of trees to make maple syrup. We have buckets just like that one that are hanging off the trees, and you can hear a reassuring clink, clink, clink. I ran on the snowshoes and I ran past the plinking that sounded like the tears of the people that I was listening to on the phone who were desperate for just a little more food for their children, and it was too much for me to bear. And I ran and I ran, and I fell and I tripped, and I finally saw one last bucket. It was even more deformed than that one. It was rusted through, and I could not imagine anyone drinking the sap out of that bucket. And I wondered about the person who put it there. Sap was dripping. It clearly had been put up this year. Had it been forgotten? Had it been left out? Had it been empty? My heart had felt like the ache, the tears of the world were overflowing this bucket. And I stood up, and I opened the lid, and that bucket had been faithfully emptied and was just as fresh and ready to go as the next one. We see some people in our lives who are aching, and you wonder possibly, how can there be transformation? We have those holes in our heart that we don't want to go near because we wonder, how can we possibly engage? But this wilderness space that we're journeying through this Lent is exactly the space that we can live in, that we can find the connection. It may not seem possible now, but the transformation that happens is miraculous. It is the voice of those angels who are waiting on Jesus, not like servers at a restaurant, but as a great cloud of witnesses. Let us be, for one another, a great cloud of witnesses who will journey through that wilderness together, that we might break open our hearts, that our buckets may be filled with joy and hope, and not tears of anguish. May it be so. Amen.